for Mondawais. What is the general's plan? Israel's ongoing ethnic cleansing of northern Gaza explained. The ethnic cleansing of northern Gaza as part of the so-called general's plan isn't new, but the only thing standing in the way is the will of 200,000 Palestinians to stay in the north and refuse displacement.
It has been 11 days since Israel started its latest offensive against the northern part of the Gaza Strip, which includes a complete siege of the towns of Jabalia, Beit Luhiya, and Beit Hanun, just north of Gaza City. These were the first areas that the Israeli forces first entered at the beginning of the ground invasion almost a year ago, and they're also the first areas where the Israeli army declared full operational control after it claimed to have destroyed all the fighting units of the Palestinian resistance factions. The ongoing Israeli assault includes a ground invasion of the town of Jabalia and its refugee camp for the third time in a year. For 11 days, Israeli forces have imposed a siege on Jabalia and pounded it with intensive artillery shelling and airstrikes, destroying its remaining standing residential blocks and cutting the population off from Gaza City directly to the south. Israeli forces have also clashed with Palestinian fighters from different resistance factions. Last week, the armed wing of Hamas, the Al-Qassam brigades, released video footage showing an ambush in which its fighters targeted a group of Israeli jeeps and armored vehicles with IEDs and anti-armor projectiles, showcasing their organization, planning, and fighting capabilities a year after Israel declared that it has destroyed all resistance in the city. According to the Palestinian Civil Defense, at least 350 Palestinians have been killed in northern Gaza since the beginning of the ongoing offensive. But beyond the direct victims of bombing and shelling, the Israeli offensive on the north is strangling an estimated 200,000 Palestinians who remain in their homes in the area. Testimonies from survivors in Jabalia told Mondawais that they are surviving on canned food and whatever remains of vegetables or meat that entered through humanitarian aid before the start of the siege. What little food remains, locals say, is now being sold for 10 times its normal price. Israel's current offensive in northern Gaza is being reported in the media as the apparent implementation of what has become to be known as the General's Plan. The plan is based on a vision laid out in two separate articles by retired Israeli General Eland in the early months of the war. Eland's vision is that Israel should impose unlivable conditions on the inhabitants of northern Gaza by starving them out and forcing them to leave to the south. Whoever remains, Eland said, would be considered a Hamas member or sympathizer and thus a legitimate target. The idea is to drain northern Gaza of its population and thus isolate Hamas from its social base, forcing it to capitulate or die. While Israel has not saved a single inch of the Gaza Strip from attack over the past year, its focus on the north of Gaza, and Jabalia in particular, is twofold. Northern Gaza, particularly Gaza City, is the most populous area of the Gaza Strip, containing more than 50% of the Strip's population. Jabalia has traditionally been a stronghold of support for Hamas, and has proven to be the place where the resistance has been able to recoup despite massive hits since last October. By tightening the noose around northern Gaza and squeezing out what little is left, Israel will be able to further its goal of ethnic cleansing and annexation. Last September, several Israeli generals endorsed Eland's vision and proposed it to the government. Netanyahu then told Israeli lawmakers that he was considering the general's plan, which was recently reported on by AP. 2 weeks later, the siege on the north and the ground invasion of Jabalia began. Despite the media attention that the plan has received as an Israeli strategic innovation in the war, there is nothing new about it. In essence, it is an enhanced version of the same Israeli anti-insurgency strategy that is practiced since it first started fighting guerrilla resistance groups shortly after its founding. The strategy was formalized in the 2006 Second Lebanon War under the Dalia Doctrine, named after the mass destruction Israel caused in Beirut's southern suburb, and formulated by the Israeli Army's former Chief of Staff, Eisenkot. The Dalia Doctrine is essentially a strategy of mass collective punishment, designed to cause disproportionate damage to civilian infrastructure under the assumption that either the population will turn on the resistance or the resistance will give up. However, Eland's vision has another component not encompassed by the Dalia Doctrine, the forcible transfer of the population through the constant bombardment and starvation, forcing them to leave or die. This isn't the first time Israel has tried to carry out this vision throughout the Gaza genocide. Since October of last year, Israel forced around 1 million Gazans to leave northern Gaza and Gaza City to flee to the south of Wadi Gaza, the river that separates Gaza City from central and southern Gaza. Israel also created a military zone around Wadi Gaza called the Netzarim Corridor, making it impossible for Palestinians to return to their homes in the north. Israel has insisted on preventing their return and has been one of the main sticking points in ceasefire talks. Israel maintains this position, ironically, as it wages a second war on Lebanon, with the stated objective of returning Israelis to the north, which has largely been evacuated since the start of the war due to the support front launched by Hezbollah on October 8, 2023. The unspoken component of the general's plan in northern Gaza, however, relates to Israel's desire to resettle Gaza. In other words, to replace the Palestinian population with an Israeli settler population, which would mean the eventual annexation of northern Gaza to Israel proper. In January, a group of Israeli settlers organizations celebrated a conference in Jerusalem attended by thousands of settlers to voice their demands to be allowed to move to Gaza. In the conference, Danilo Weiss, a leader figure of the hardline settler movement, said in a speech that neither Hamas nor the PLO, nor the UN, nor UNRWA, but only Jews can rule Gaza. In an interview with Israeli media, Weiss called for erasing Gaza and letting Israelis move there so that they can see the sea. The conference was also attended by Israel's National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, one of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's key allies, who endorses Weiss and the demands of the settlers. Even this implicit aspect of the general's plan is not particularly novel. The depopulation of Palestinian land with the object of replacing the native population with settlers has been the essence of the Zionist project since its inception. What Israel is trying to do in Jabalia and northern Gaza is a continuation of what the Zionist movement did in 1948 and has continued to do more gradually ever since. The general's plan is a condensation of century-long colonial policy. Haifa, Jaffa, Ascalon, Tiberias, and West Jerusalem all used to be northern Gaza. Today, the southern Hebron Hills and the Jordan Valley, where Palestinians are not allowed to build or graze and are attacked by Israeli settlers, are a less intense version of northern Gaza. The Bedouin villages in the Naqab, which are unrecognized by the State of Israel and live under the constant threat of demolition, are yet another version of northern Gaza. The inaction of world governments, especially the U.S., to stop the realization of the general's plan in Jabalia, Beit Hanun, and Beit Lahiya, suggests that these governments endorse the plan and its larger strategy of genocidal ethnic cleansing. The only thing standing in the way of the general's plan is the decision of more than 200,000 Palestinians to stay in the north and refuse displacement. Despite the bombs, drone attacks, hunger, and brutal siege, the clash of the two wills is the essence of the war for Palestine since 1948. Yeah, they're invading and bombing rubble. There's nothing left of Gaza City. There's nothing left of North Gaza. So they're just bombing people in rubble and invading.
It's like if it's like if we in the United States decided that we were going to take reservation land back from Native Americans and just started bombing and attacking them and saying that, well, it's our right, the book says we can be here, so it's our right to take this land from you. Those are Native Americans. You already displaced them.
Yeah, it'd be like us bombing reservations right now, today. Insanity.
And everybody just sitting back and being like, well, they're almost done, so maybe we'll possibly, if they don't behave in 30 days, like if they're not, done wiping them out in 30 days, then we'll pretend like we're going to do something. As long as you vote for us, and then once we're in office, we'll just give them some more money and weapons.
They're saying now that they'll promise an embargo of Israel's arms after the election.
Which means they're not going to do it.
Yeah, which means they're just going to keep capitulating to Netanyahu even if they're in office. Yeah. That's all they're going to, even though she's trying to campaign in Michigan, like you're going to read later, but even her promising like something as timid as that, I guess that's her strategy in trying to gain Michigan back.
Understand what virtue signaling is. Just look at like Nancy Pelosi. It's when they pretend like they care, but they actually don't do anything policy-wise or in office to make any substantial change.
You just described a Democrat.
Let's pretend like we're going to do something, but like just not. At least the Republicans do the shit that they say. It's just all fucked up.
Yeah. It's like fucked up, like theocratic fascist shit, but like.
We're going to go back to like women can't be on birth control without their husband's permission and shit like that.
Yep, and you're not going to be able to divorce me.
Probably.
Actually, you could probably say you can cite the mental illness and they'll probably be like, yeah, you're right. You need to get out of here.
I don't even think that was... I don't think female could just like initiate it at all, regardless of the situation. Even if there's like spousal abuse,
they're just talking about no fault divorce. If there's no reason not to get divorced, you shouldn't get divorced. Is what they're saying.
Which means if you don't have anything on
But you have
paper,
reasons because I'm schizophrenic.
I don't know if they would call that justifiable or not, honestly.
I think they would. I think they're like, yeah, lady, you need to get with someone else.
No fault divorce. So let's make two people who clash, fucking hate each other, who do nothing but yell and scream at each other, who just cannot get along. Let's let the kids just live in that. Sweet. That's so stupid. So stupid. Anyway. Fuck Israel.
From the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free.
Fuck Israel.
From the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free.
Fuck Israel. How do you think Native Americans would act? Seriously, if we started trying to take back reservations, like what would you expect from them?
Well, what they would do is probably what the corporate media would say, theism.
They'd fight back.
Yeah.
Just like they've been fighting for their rights since we colonized.
Being in America just makes you want to burn down a post office.
Maybe not a post office, I like the mail. What about not letting your uranium trucks drive through their land, spreading toxins to their water, possibly destroy those? Oh wait, those things have been happening. Weird. I'm imagining like an old time, like them having bows and arrows compared to guns. That is what I'm imagining, because like they literally used
Think Red Dawn.
because like Israel used a 7-year-old kid to defend themselves from
Think
people
the
throwing rocks.
newer Red Dawn movie when they're just like living in the woods and shit. Except they're all Native Americans and they're fucking angry as hell.
Yeah, you don't fuck with Native Americans on their land, just like you don't fuck with Palestinians on their land.
And I would join them.
Well, a lot of people would, because they would have every right to fight back.
Yeah.
It's almost like, colonizing, taking to the string. They have the right to fight back for their areas. There's a lot of examples to use for Americans, which makes me wonder why we don't learn from our mistakes. That's the whole fucking point of history. And I slept through history and I understand that. It's to not repeat your past mistakes, yet we're letting a Holocaust happen in real time while it's live streamed and we just sit back and be like, yeah, but like, the Nazis have a right to defend themselves.
Native Americans have the right to defend themselves. Evil U.S., evil empire.
That's because capitalism is evil at its core, and there's no such thing as moral capitalism, because you can't have somebody be at the top of capitalism who has morals, because not moral people will make it to the top. That's just, you have to cut throats. It's a dog-eat-dog world is how they refer to corporate offices and stuff like that. Because capitalism at its core, it will always be evil. There's no such thing as a moral capitalism.
A very good percentage of CEOs are sociopaths.
You can't have morals.
It tells you what gets you ahead in this system.
Yes. So capitalism, it doesn't work for the middle class. And running on saying that it can is just being ignorant at its core. I'm sorry. I wanted to like him, but you can't be like, I want to fuck Israel and then capitalism works. That's not. Those are both lies. Yeah, I am.
Okay, so what the hell's going on?
That's where I went, because the moral capitalism thing, because like it doesn't work. There is no such thing. You can't have capitalism.
He's talking about Sam Walls is a Keynesian. He's a Keynesian economist.
He's ignorant.
Yeah, but he's showing Israel folks.
Well, he's ignorant to think that capitalism can be moral. It's not possible.
Yeah, they want to call him a commie or a socialist. He's not. He's just he's a social democrat at most.
I liked him when he was like, one person's socialism is just another person's neighborliness. Like, okay, that's actually pretty legit, because that is how that works. And he explains how roads work and how like public buildings work, and yet we still take a step back and say socialism's bad when he's literally pointing out how socialism is good. Like, what? Okay, sorry. No, I went off on a tangent.
When they try to point out the things wrong with socialism, they're just describing things wrong with capitalism.
Yes.
It's hilarious. This is from Mondeweiss. I'm betting on Gaza. It is unbreakable. October 7 showed that Palestinians and Arabs remain the rightful heirs of our story. We remain primary witnesses to testify to our past, present, and future.
This is not the first time I've written an anniversary essay. I had something to say in May 2023, June 2017, May 2018, May 2013, May 2008, May 1998. I had something to say 100 years after Sykes and Pickett carved up our homelands with their red and blue pens. I know the drill. To commemorate an event, to mark a discrete period, often relies on certain narrative conventions and literary devices. These include chronicling what we have borne witness to, what the teachable moments are, the diagnostic and the remedial a reflection on how I feel about the past, present, and future. I respect everything about this exercise, but this is not an anniversary piece. I cannot write the way I used to. I cannot curate a paragraph of facts and figures that encapsulate the apocalyptic horror we have witnessed for the past year. I want to resist the impulse to stocktake our suffering. I cannot measure the destruction and injustice when the genocide continues and Israel's industrialized slaughter has now expanded to Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen. Since October 7th, which by the way is not when history started, but since October 7th, we have seen in real time, live streamed to our screens, apocalyptic scenes of violence, methodically inflicted on a besieged population as the world watches on, and in the service of a political project that has unfinished demographic business, that requires the extermination of the brutes, the elimination of the native in order to achieve the goal of an Israeli majority and control over the entire stolen land from the river to the sea and beyond, into southern Lebanon and Syria. Each day has been a horrifying chronicle of industrialized genocide, domicide, scholasticide, infanticide, femicide, meticide, and ecocide. We should never get used to the mass killing of anyone. And we shouldn't be used to men dying in war, because war should be a thing of the past. Have we not moved past that? Like, have we not evolved to a point to where we can either
Defense
get
contract
along?
money is too good.
Oh yeah, capitalism. Sorry, my bad. I forgot about that. Capitalism is when you get to sit at the top and push little buttons and let other men die because you are too stubborn to talk something out.
Why? Why do they always send the poor?
Well, the poor and the uneducated are good meat fodder. In Russia, I know you probably had to take a lot of that out, but I know, like in Russia, they're sending the people that aren't actually Russians to the front lines to be just human shields. Yeah, human shields. That's what the poor and uneducated are for, is human shields. And little pawns on the table that somebody else gets to decide what your life is worth, and your life is worth oil, land. Your life is worth nothing, actually, because if your life was worth something, they wouldn't send you to die, because they are too fucking stubborn to sit down and have a conversation. They're too stubborn to agree to something. No, they would rather you die. Just my thoughts on war in general. Absolutely nothing. That's the truth. It's not good for anything, because what does it achieve? You have a tendency to like radicalize groups of people to hate you when you continuously do things that are hate-worthy, but like you try to like stomp out an idea, but like ideas don't die, movements don't die, hope doesn't die. It just goes to someone else.
The sad part of life is that hope never dies.
But that's the thing. Like you radicalize groups by trying to eliminate groups that you think will be radicalized. You just radicalize other parts of the world to now hate you for the rest of their lives. Even if you stop now, the amount of damage you've caused. Fuck Israel. You're going to have people that are going to be against Israel for a very, very, very long time. I cannot bear to sift through my bookmarked tweets and saved posts, a library of unfathomable horror, and decide which horror story makes the final cut as the bombs keep dropping. The capital keeps flowing. I cannot bear to sift through the fact-driven infographics, expert threads, articles, essays, podcasts, video tech-ins, interviews, TikTok posts, and Instagram stories, and offer a synopsis of this hellish landscape. How do I summarize the past year? What atrocity makes it into my word count? I cannot. To face crafting a narrative arc to 1 year of a genocide, which continues as I write this, how could I begin to even sketch characters and create a plot out of Gaza? Every protagonist, every genre, every book and movie you've ever read or watched, anything you've ever imagined, is there in that tiny strip of land. Gaza can give you a hero's journey, a children and young adult story, a horror, a dystopia, sci-fi speculation story, an action plot, political dramas aplenty, tragedy, comedies, legal dramas, and simple cast a spin-off series in Lebanon. And none of them have been enough to stop the slaughter. Instead of reflecting on the past year, I find myself thinking about accountability. What this requires of us when the day comes and we witness the fall of empire. how we account for all the crimes, and ensure the deliverance of justice. When, not if, Israel, the Western world, and the Arab regimes collapse and are held to account by the people, it will be a time for reckoning, where we present a register of our warnings, our pleas, our foreshadowing, and the chain of causation. If you ask me about hope, there was a glimmer on October 7th. It was palpable, real, and exhilarating. If you ask me about confusion, fear, and expectations, they were there in the early hours and days. If you ask me about genocide, it could have been stopped. If you ask me about freedom, justice, and peace, it could have been achieved. For these reasons, we must keep the exhibits for the moment of our reckoning. For this essay, I offer not only my words, but some of the words of my friends and comrades with me in the diaspora in the settler colony of Australia, whose initial reactions to October 7th revealed that Palestinians and Arabs remain, and must insist on remaining, the rightful heirs of our story. We remain the primary witnesses to testify to our past, present, and future. We remain the owners of our narrative. We predicted, we analyzed, sometimes we overestimated, sometimes we underestimated. I go back and read the messages we exchanged in those early October days, and I weep, because at the time, as we typed words of hope, fear, and confusion, we did not know that some of us would witness the killing of family members. We did not know that 1 year on, the homes and lives of some of our family and friends would be destroyed. As some of us wrote about evacuating our families and friends, we did not know that they would be forced to complete their own Nakba. We did not know that our casualties would be steady global live stream of Israel shredding, bombing, decapitating, and mutilating children, women, men, healthcare workers, journalists, students, teachers, and every category of human, only because the Palestinian, the Arab, has been designated as non-human. When we were inconsolable at 1,000 martyred children, we could not imagine that the world's governments would allow the murder of 16,500, possibly 100,000 children by Lancet's calculations. And remind us 1 year on that our voices are enough if only the world would listen. This is from Mondowise. How Israel is exploiting Lebanese sectarian rifts in its assault on Beirut and southern Lebanon. Israel is deepening Lebanese social rifts by bombing areas that have been considered historically safe from Israeli attacks, dissuading the residents of those areas from sheltering displaced people from the south.
On Monday, September 23rd, more than 500,000 people were displaced from southern Lebanon after Israel launched a full-scale attack on towns and civilians under the pretext of targeting Hezbollah's storage facilities. We've seen this play out in Gaza and know for a fact that its excuse aims to manufacture consent to massacre entire families and destroy entire towns. The Israeli goal is clear: to rob the land and kill the people, while expelling those it cannot kill.
Can't kill an idea.
Palestine is not the only place Israel is trying to occupy under the pretext of a promised land. Lebanon has always been a target of Israel's occupation forces. At the same time, internal Lebanese social rifts and contradictions, which have been politically institutionalized in a confessional political system, are being exploited by Israeli forces to get Lebanese citizens from different sectarian and political backgrounds to turn on one another. On one hand, there are a large number of supporters of the resistance and liberation movements, while on the other, there is a far-right group that supports normalizing relations with Israel and markets peace as the only way forward. The same group is associated with a militia that massacred Palestinians during the Lebanese Civil War from 1975 to 1990, most notably during the Sabra and Shatila massacre in 1982 that took place with the help of Israeli forces.
And American money.
Probably.
No doubt.
Lebanon has experienced a surge in the uncovering of informants and collaborators over the past few weeks who have been caught on the ground by the Lebanese security forces. This has fueled speculation among people that the Israeli government has reached out once again to its internal supporters to create a deeper division within the Lebanese population. These Israeli attempts to sow division come at a time that requires full-scale unity and social solidarity rather than deepening social rifts. By exacerbating the sectarian tensions that have long plagued Lebanon, Israel aims to weaken both the resistance and the broader society in service of a larger goal of invasion and occupation. When the first wave of the displaced from the south arrived in Beirut, many of them asked to stay away from the Christian areas where they did not feel welcomed. But in times of war, the enemy is the same for everyone, and so is the threat. Those social rifts were overlooked for a while, and everyone opened their homes to friends and families from the south. But it didn't last. At the end of September, almost 5 days after the start of intense fighting, videos of a fight circulated online showing people refused to shelter those whom they accused of having brought the war upon Lebanon. The altercation took place in Ain al-Romana, a Christian street in Beirut where some people from the south had rented an apartment. Slowly and quietly, a number of displaced families decided to leave some of the Christian areas, once again under the threat of homelessness.
It's not Christian-like not to open up your home to those in need. I think that was a story in the Bible, I believe, where a homeless man came up to somebody and it ended up being like God or whatever. But like, yeah, that's even in your little Christian Bible. So you use your book to kill people, but you won't use your book to save them.
Intisar is 24 years old. She's from the south of Lebanon, where the majority of the people there are Shia Muslims. When the heavy bombing started, she and her family fled immediately. They didn't know where they were going and just wanted to leave, expecting to find open homes for them in Beirut, considering the state of war. It's not a war on us alone, it's a war on all of Lebanon and everyone, she told Mondelez. Intisar said that once they arrived in a Christian area in Beirut, I started noticing people looking at me strangely walking down the street because of my hijab. But I didn't understand why. And am I the first veiled woman who walks these streets? Intisar and her family started to get scared and limited their movements in the area. At this point, we stopped being afraid of the war. We were just worried by people around us, she said, explaining that she felt as if their presence was clearly rejected. Those fears were confirmed when 2 men they did not know knocked on the door one evening, threatening them and asking to speak with the owner who had rented them the apartment. Immediately after that night, first thing in the morning, the building owner called us and told us we were not allowed to stay in the apartment, Intisar said. I don't know if they think that the enemy, Israel, is only fighting one sect, but after that incident, we stopped looking for a safe place from the war. We started searching for a place that accepts us. We always thought that if something like this happens, we would all be brought together, but this was much harder than the actual war we're living through, being rejected by our own people, she said. This incident alone did not deepen the social rift within broader Lebanese society, drawing widespread public condemnation of the event on social media amid calls for unity during this time. Volunteers from many different backgrounds continue to help displaced people, exemplifying the attempts of ordinary Lebanese citizens to bridge historic social cleavages. But despite these attempts, the targeting of certain neighborhoods and buildings by Israeli airstrikes led many on the ground to believe that Israel was attempting to further the rift by bombing historically safe areas of the city and hence aiming to dissuade the locals of those areas from taking in the displaced. On September 24, Israel attacked a house in Mayesra in the northern area of Lebanon where the majority of inhabitants are Christian. 16 people were killed, 7 of them from the south. Then on Friday, September 27th, Israel targeted another house full of displaced people in a town in the Shof area, Badran, whose inhabitants are mostly Druze, killing 8 people from the same family. Later during the night, it attacked another Christian town in Mount Lebanon called Bamdun, with no casualties recorded. An increased escalation took place on October 6th when Israeli forces bombed 3 houses full of refugees from the south. A few days later, on October 9th, Israel targeted a residential apartment and a hotel housing displaced people in Wardanieh, also in the Shah area. And just 2 days ago, on October 12th, another house in Masrah was targeted in the same area as the September 24th bombing, killing 9 and injuring 15. All of these areas across Lebanon are historically considered safe from Israeli attacks, but most crucially, they are areas that have always opened their homes to displaced people during previous wars in Lebanon. The message Israel wanted to send by targeting these areas was clear. If you house displaced people, you will be attacked. In parallel to these attacks earlier in September, Lebanese people in many areas across Beirut and elsewhere started receiving texts or phone calls on landlines asking them to leave their buildings or flee their locations immediately because they were close to Hezbollah. They were close to a Hezbollah facility. Some of these messages named specific buildings full of civilians in the historically safe areas of Beirut. For 2 days straight, fake news circulated over WhatsApp groups and via text messages on personal mobile phones, either asking people to evacuate immediately or asking people to not accept Southerners in their towns or homes as they might be Hezbollah members. People took these threats seriously and thought they were from the Israeli army, leading to widespread panic. After a while, it was discovered that most of these messages were fake. They were either sent by people pranking each other, such as a group of 2 young men who decided to prank their friend who owned a few buildings on a sunny street in Beirut, that house displaced people, or by other nefarious actors sending mass messages. Until now, it is still unclear who was behind the misinformation campaign. The Lebanese internal security forces announced that they were looking into the incidents and will make the appropriate measures and will take appropriate measures to deal with the situation. Whether the text messages were simply pranks gone wrong or a more sinister psychological plot, the timing of the incidents resulted in an even more terrified population, already on edge over the possibility of being bombed or displaced at any moment.
Do you remember when Hawaii got those mass messages that they were about to be hit by a nuclear bomb, but it was just an accident test warning kind of thing? Do we remember that? Did we think that was funny? Was that funny? Did people in Hawaii think that was funny?
More recently, on September 30th, another wave of fake news flooded the local and international channels about the start of a ground invasion. International channels would report the beginning of the invasion, while local channels would copy the news without verification, even though most local channels have war correspondents on the ground in the south. Right-wing media channels that politically aligned with the groups that massacred Palestinians during the Civil War, the same groups that today call for normalizing relations with Israel, immediately picked up the Israeli narrative and disseminated it without fact-checking. For an entire day, people thought that all of Lebanon was being invaded, but in reality, Israel had launched a limited invasion that was being actively pushed back and forced to retreat by the Lebanese resistance. The same thing happened a few days later when the Israeli army published pictures from a town it claimed to have invaded, only to be completely denied later in the evening. Since the beginning of the ground invasion on September 30th, the occupying Israeli forces have failed to permanently position themselves on Lebanese territory as the time of writing. During the first 2 days of the vaunted ground invasion, 8 Israeli soldiers were killed. An estimated 39 Israeli soldiers were killed between the start of the invasion to October 11th, while the Israeli attacks killed over 2,200 Lebanese and injured over 10,000. One of the most important aspects of this war is the Israeli campaign of psychological terror and media propaganda. The Israeli government is doing everything in its power to weaken and divide the social fabric of Lebanon, hoping to foment mass flight and social disintegration among those who remain.
Stay strong. Don't let them destroy who you actually are.
This is Ramonda Weiss. Recent reports reveal how deeply implicated the U.S. is in the Gaza genocide.
In recent weeks, a number of stories have broken, revealing key details about the Biden administration's foreign policy support for Israel's continued genocide in Palestine. At the end of September, we had a bombshell report from Brett Murphy on ProPublica, revealing that Secretary of State Anthony Blinken rejected 2 reports showing that Israel was blocking humanitarian aid to Gaza. Later, in a carefully worded statement, Blinken told Congress that we do not currently assess that the Israeli government is prohibiting or otherwise restricting the transport or delivery of U.S. humanitarian assistance. Days later, Politico reported that White House officials had informed the Israeli government that they would support the country ramping up its attacks on Lebanon. The assurances came while the administration publicly called for diplomacy in the region. Yeah, that's Democrats. When we had a Reuters report showing us that the U.S. government had early concerns about Israel potentially committing war crimes in Gaza, here's a part of the story. After Israeli airstrikes hit Gaza's hospitals, schools, and mosques, the U.S. State Department's top public diplomacy official, Bill Russo, told senior state officials that Washington was losing credibility among Arabic-speaking audiences by not directly addressing the humanitarian crisis, according to an October 11th email. Gaza's health authorities reported that day a death toll of about 1,200. As Israel defended the strikes, saying Hamas was using civilian buildings for military purposes, Russo wrote that U.S. diplomats in the Middle East were monitoring Arab media reports that accused Israel of waging a genocide and Washington of complicity in war crimes. This feels like just common sense to me. The U.S.'s lack of response on the humanitarian conditions for Palestinians is not only ineffective and counterproductive, but we are also being accused of being complicit to potential war crimes. By remaining silent on Israel's actions against civilians, Russo wrote. At the time, emergency workers were struggling to save people buried under the rubble from Israel airstrikes, and the world's sympathies were beginning to shift from murdered Israelis to besieged Palestinian civilians. Addressing State Department leaders, Russo urged quick action to shift the administration's public stance of unqualified supporters for Israel and its military operation in Gaza. If this course is not quickly reversed by not only messaging but action, it risks damaging our stance in the region for years to come, he wrote. Russo resigned in March, citing personal reasons. He declined to comment. There's a lot going on in the world, but any of those stories could classify as being as a big scandal. At the very least, they give us some insight into how frequently government officials lie to the public, reporters, and Congress about their involvement in the region and their perception of what Israel is doing. There's reality, and then there's not reality. How can you have a perception of what is not real? Your perception of what is happening in the region? What the fuck are you talking about? I'm sorry, I need to bomb a preschool because I think there's a bomb there. But it's underground. It's way underground. You can't see it. And we have no proof. But that baby had a gun. Last week, I interviewed Middle East analyst Moin Rabbani about the Biden administration's motivations. Here's what he said when I asked him why the White House has yet to impose any red lines on Netanyahu's actions. I think it's quite clear that the U.S. is now fully on board with what I wouldn't call an Israeli agenda. I would call a joint U.S.-Israeli agenda, an agenda to change the face of the region. And here again, there's also, I think, an important geopolitical element that we shouldn't ignore, which is that the United States is committed to Israel, perhaps for multiple reasons. But an important one is that it sees Israel as a key outpost of U.S. interests in the Middle East. If you look at it from that perspective, then any Israeli loss weakens the U.S., and any Israeli victory strengthens the U.S. position, not only in the region, but around the world as well. For the U.S., the only serious, real red line is Israeli failure. That is the only thing that the United States will not accept. He's writing the truth, which is a fucking disgusting fact, that this is the United States attempting to colonize the Middle East. That's all I'm hearing.
Yeah,
and he's right.
State, but...
It's not a rogue state when we keep giving them money and support and everything else. It's not a rogue state. It is the United States fully fucking funding a goddamn genocide, a goddamn colonization of native peoples, because that's what the fucking United States does. I hate this place. This is probably a good insight to keep in mind when looking at the recent developments regarding Iran. After the country's ballistic missile attack on Israel, Biden and a vast number of U.S. politicians said that the U.S. would support Israel's retaliation, but the president also publicly cautioned against hitting Iran's nuclear sites. Iran gave warning after warning after warning after warning after warning for Israel to stop, to a point to where they're like, hey, we're literally about to send some bombs over. We're not trying to hurt anyone or anything like that, but we're going to send them because we need to let you guys know this is not okay. So we need to stand up for our people in our area. We're going to do this. This week, Biden and Netanyahu spoke for the first time in months to discuss the escalating situation, but the White House provided no information about Israel's plans after the call because they support it. According to an NBC report, U.S. military officials have discussed various options for joining Israel in its reprisal attack on Iran. The previous section of this newsletter points to the fact that State Department spokespeople are consistently tasked with getting in front of reporters and lying if not playing dumb. That truth establishes a nice preface for the following exchange, which took place between State Department spokesman Matthew Miller and Al-Quds Said Erekat this week. Miller was asked about a new report from the Costs of War Project at Brown University on U.S. military spending. The report found that the United States has spent more than $17.9 billion on military aid to Israel since the war in Gaza began. But, can't help you guys in North Carolina. Sorry. A bunch of you died and can't get help or lived in houses that are flooded or sorry guys. We gotta send the money to Israel. They need it more. Miller pushed back on the question, insisting that the report conflates a number of things, including direct U.S. military spending to combat the Houthis attacking international shipping, which is included in that number, which is obviously not aid to Israel. Here's Quincy Institute senior research fellow William Hartung speaking to The Intercept about Miller's claim. The State Department spokesman is correct that our analysis conflates a number of different drivers of the cost of U.S. military support for Israel and our escalating role in the region. That was the point. to show how much taxpayers are providing in support of a deeply misguided policy to continue arming Israel even as it commits war crimes, not potential actual war crimes. Everybody sees them. As it commits war crimes that some experts believe can plausibly be called a genocide. It was telling that the State Department spokesperson critiqued our estimate, unfairly we believe, but could not answer the question of how much the U.S. is spending in support of Israel's Middle East wars. This kind of lack of transparency, even as we are on the verge of possible direct involvement in the wars sparked by Israel's actions since the invasion of Gaza, is simply unacceptable. Back to the exchange. After Miller rejected the findings, the AP's Matt Lee followed up with a natural inquiry. If the report overstated the numbers, then how much has Israel gotten? Miller claimed he didn't know. I want my money to go to schools, to roads, to post offices. I want it to go to people on Social Security. I want it to go to people who are disabled. I want it to go to hospitals. I don't want my money to go to killing people. I want it to go to saving and helping people. But to continue to give money to people just so that they can murder other people is not right, and it's not okay. And it's not something I support, and I don't want to give you money. Where there's potholes in the roads to the hospitals. When there's construction that goes on endless because you don't have the money, because the state doesn't have the money to pay people to finish construction. It's because they're sending it all to fucking genocidal fucking maniacs. And we just let it keep happening. We just keep giving them more money without being asked because we're supposed to pay our taxes. But why? Why? Give me a good reason on why to pay my taxes. What does the U.S. government think that it has given Israel since October 7th of last year?
So we give them $3.3 billion a year, and that was additional money that was appropriated in the supplemental.
Yes.
The reason it's hard to answer the question definitively is they're different.
That you don't want to.
No.
That's why.
No, there are.
That's why it's hard to answer.
There are different ways of looking at it.
I know there are. And I've been through all of this.
There's money that's appropriated, there's money that's allocated, and there's then not actually delivered for years to come.
And look, there are private organizations, educational organizations, that have come up with estimates, This building, at least, which is in charge of arms transfers, at least many of them, hasn't seen fit to come up with an update since July of last year.
Yeah, I just don't have the update.
Okay.
I'm just telling you that number. You can look at the number and see how it inflates a number of things, including direct U.S. military spending to combat the Houthis attacking international shipping, which is included in that number, which is obviously not aid to Israel.
Yeah, but it can't be that difficult to separate what has been given to them post October 7th in terms of
Sure.
In terms of things that were not approved before then under the MOU. Stuff that went to them specifically for Gaza and now Lebanon.
So it depends on how you look at it. It is the amount that's been allocated to them. Is it the amount that's been delivered to them? Is it an amount that is going to be delivered to them?
I'll take any of them right now.
No, I know. That's the point, is when you ask the question, it's a difficult one. I don't have the numbers here at my fingertips, obviously. I'm just pointing out that the number that said referred to is grossly overinflates.
Well, someone's got to have the number someplace. I mean, yeah, Matt, the numbers were Brown University numbers, not mine and so on, but it doesn't matter what the actual figure is. But we give them a lot of money. We give them a great deal of leverage. We gives them obviously a great deal of political coverage in the UN and many other places and so on, and suggests that this huge and lengthy partnership really does not exact any kind of leverage with the Israelis. Don't you question that?
That's not what I said. The thing is that I said is that we are a sovereign country with our interests. They are a sovereign country with their interests.
Right.
Right.
Right. So they said that we're carrying out the genocides that we proved and that we came up with because we put them there in the first place, because we're just as evil as they are, and we like genocide, we like when people die. You know, everyone knows what the Holocaust is. Everyone is aware of the Holocaust. And, part of you sits and you think, like, what would I have done? If I had been alive then, what would I have done? Would I have protested? Would I have pushed for us to help? Would I have pushed for us to fight? What would I have done? And then it actually happens in your lifetime. And it's so shocking.
You're doing it right now. This is from Mondoweiss. The Harris campaign hits Michigan amid anger over Gaza policy, and is Trump talking to Netanyahu?
Is Trump talking to Netanyahu? Like, Trump loves fascist dictators. Like, are you serious? The worse they are, the more he loves them. But, the only thing is that it's the same thing with Harris. Just you actually witness with Trump because he just doesn't hide it. Vice President Kamala Harris is headed to Michigan today. The Democratic nominee is scheduled to make several appearances in the state this week. Her visit comes amid a widening war in the Middle East and growing frustration among Arab American voters over the United States government's refusal to reel in Israel is not real. If not now, spokesperson Eva Borgwat. The infuriating thing is that Kamala Harris could say now on this trip to Michigan that she supports an arm embargo, but we have seen absolutely no sign that they plan to reverse course. You can't reverse genocide. My question is for Kamala Harris and the Biden-Harris administration. Do they want to win or not? Is Donald Trump dangerous enough or not dangerous enough for them to stop funding Israel as it bombs hospitals and starves northern Gaza? The American electorate is furious as they continue to learn there's no red lines for this administration. Multiple polls show GOP nominee Donald Trump with a slight advantage in the state. Two Detroit-based Arab American groups, Arab America PAC and the Arab American News, recently decided to endorse neither candidate in the race. Engage Action endorsed Harris but expressed strong disappointment with the Biden administration Gaza policy. We're in a moment where our community is suffering and hurting in more ways than we can count. We've also seen 4 years under a Trump presidency and what that did to our community and the risks that come with that, a spokesperson at Arab Americas for Harris Waltz told The Guardian. We're not saying that with a Harris administration there is no risk, but under a Trump administration the risk is much higher. We believe it is a more favorable path forward for us here in the United States and in our home countries. Senior Harris campaign official told CNN, "We're kind of doing our best to hold the ground or limit losses. We may not get all the votes you would have expected from previous cycles, but they're going to be made up for when you're thinking about a path to victory." More from The Guardian. Ultimately, the election in Michigan may be decided by events half a world away. More than 100,000 people voted uncommitted in the state's Democratic primaries in February in a protest against Biden-Harris support for Israel's war in Gaza. As the Palestinian civilian death toll climbed into the tens of thousands, but the uncommitted movement is now alarmed at the prospect of those supporters boycotting Harris if it delivers Michigan to Trump. On Tuesday, the group's co-founder Lexi Zidane pleaded in a video on social media to not let that happen. As a Palestinian American, the current administration's handling of this genocide has been beyond enraging and demoralizing, but the reality is that it can get worse. Nobody wants a Trump presidency more than Netanyahu because that is his ticket to wiping Palestine off the map, she said. Lexi's warning fell well short of an endorsement of Harris, but across Michigan. The vice president's campaign is counting on fear of Trump as much as enthusiasm for the vice president to get her over the line. Last week, Rolling Stone ran an interview with Arab American Institute President James Zogby. Here's his response to a question about Michigan. The Lebanese in Dearborn are mostly Shia from South Lebanon because when Israel invaded in 1978 and then in 1982, intensified and expanded the area that they were occupying, 2 villages in South Lebanon emptied out to Dearborn. Today, the majority population in Dearborn is Arab American. The mayor is Arab. The police chief is Arab. The state representative is Arab. The congresswoman is Rashida Tlaib. Many of the constituents are Lebanese who have deep attachments to Palestinians. In this election, I think the expansion of Israel's war into Lebanon will either put an exclamation point on the outrage or depression, causing them either not to vote or to flip and vote elsewhere. Vote Jill Stein. And here's his response to a question about whether the Arab voter shift to Trump is reversible. The Trump vote, going to 42%, was an increase of 7%, but that 7% was soft. We asked the voters if Harris was to demand a ceasefire or if she were to say she would suspend arms aid unless Israel agreed to a ceasefire. Her numbers went up from 42 to 62%. That's 20% that you're missing out on because you're a fucking shitty person. Good job. She regained a significant number of Trump voters, of Trump votes that were the people basically voting for him as a protest against Democrats. The reaction I'm getting when I go around the country and talk to people is they want to punish Democrats. That's a smart political move. That's not a smart political move, but that's what people are feeling. And I don't have an argument to make because they haven't given us arguments to make. It's unclear if anyone in the mainstream media cares about this story, but Trump continues to tell people that he's talking to Netanyahu, the imposter. Last week, the former president told Fox News that he spoke with the Israeli prime minister like 2 days ago. I can tell you that Bibi has been very strong, Trump said. He's not listening to Biden. Oh, you must love that. Must make you want to shit your pants. You might recall that PBS correspondent Judy Woodruff issued a public apology in August after citing a story from Axios and Reuters about Trump pressuring Netanyahu to reject ceasefire talks. Trump and Netanyahu denied the call took place. This prompted Woodruff to release the following statement. I want to clarify my remarks on the PBS News special on Monday night about the ongoing ceasefire talks in the Middle East. As I said, this was not based on my original reporting. I was referring to reports I had read in Axios and Reuters about former President Trump having spoken to Israeli Prime Minister. In the live TV moment, I repeated the story because I hadn't seen later reporting that both sides denied it. This was a mistake and I apologize for it. The story quickly faded away, framed as a right-wing press as another example of anti-Trump bias in the media. However, if Netanyahu really told Trump that he wasn't listening to Biden days ago, then it feels like the press should revisit the topic, as such chats would quite obviously violate the Logan Act. One wonders what the reaction would be if Trump were talking to the head of a state that isn't a close U.S. ally, while the leader was carrying out a genocidal assault and widening his war into neighboring countries. This is from Al Jazeera. Democrats attack third-party candidate Jill Stein in razor-thin race. Democrats issue their first ad slamming Green Party candidate, even as she polls at about 1%.
With less than a month to go until Election Day in the United States, Democrats are locked in a tight battle for every available vote in the presidential campaign and have taken on third-party candidates they see as potential spoilers. The DNC, the party's executive branch, issued a television advertisement on Friday attacking Jill Stein, the longtime Green Party candidate, to whom some progressives, disillusioned with the Democratic candidate, Vice President Kamala Harris, have flocked. The advertisement, which is running in the swing states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, blames Stein for Republican challenger Donald Trump's 2016 win and warns that a vote for Stein is really a vote for Trump, a refrain Democrats have regularly leveled against her in tight races between their candidates and Trump.
I'm sorry, I love that they're blaming her for the 2016
That's
win.
crazy because it's not even true. And more Bernie bros voted for Hillary than Hillary people voted for Obama in 2008.
Yeah,
They've done like studies and shit on this before. It's just a blue MAGA talking point.
I know, but it's hilarious. And people voted for Donald Trump because they didn't want a politician in office anymore. They thought Donald Trump works like we do, so he's going to be for the people, right? I mean, they were wrong. Don't get me wrong. They were incorrect. He's not for the people. He is for the 1% making money, and the rest of us just starving to death like Palestinians. But also understand that, like, Jill Stein had nothing to do with that. That's just so hilarious. That is the fault of politicians being politicians. That is the fault of Democrats being Democrats. Because when you constantly say one thing and then do the complete opposite of what you tell people, they don't want you in office anymore. And that is what a politician is. A politician is a liar, and we all know it. So they wanted something different, and you can't blame them for wanting something different. But the thing is that a vote for Jill Stein is a vote for a future, is a vote for all of us.
A vote for Jill Stein is a vote for Jill Stein.
It's a vote for the American people, because she actually has our interest at heart. Because she actually is not being paid by AIPAC and by all these other supporters that aren't supposed to be the ones that even pay our politicians to run. I mean, this is ridiculous. Jill Stein is a vote for the American people. She's not a vote for a corporate Democrat. She's not a vote for a Republican, whatever you want, fascist. She's a vote for the people. Look at Jill Stein's policies. Look at Trump's. Look at Harris. Harris just now was like, oh, well, maybe we'll do an arms embargo. Maybe. Harris has been saying it. Jill Stein has been saying it forever. Not since October 7th, because that's not when history started. She's been saying it the whole time. They will blame everyone except for accepting responsibility for their own actions. It's your fault that Trump got into office because you're a politician who's just a liar.
Oh,
we don't trust
Hillary was a bad candidate.
So is Harris.
And they still can't swallow that pill.
So is Biden. They threw Biden in there. Barely fucking alive. No offense.
They picked their winners.
And then they stepped back and they're like, nah, we're going to just swap that out with Harris. We know nobody decided that Harris should be in there, but that's what we're going to do because she's on the payroll with AIPAC.
The video also includes a comment by former President Trump saying, Jill Stein, I like her very much. the advertisement, you know what? Donald Trump gave money to Kamala's fucking campaign in California. So,
And a broken clock can be right twice a day.
so he says everything. If you say everything, then
Something will
some of it's gonna
stick.
be true. Some of it's going to be true. I don't know. The advertisement, the first against the third-party candidate, signals Democrats' growing worry that every lost vote may cost them such a razor-thin election. Instead of actually doing anything exciting or like things that people actually want, they're going to punch down, punch left, constantly. That's what they do.
Listen to the people and do what the people want.
When things get down for Democrats, they punch down and to the left.
Because they're the people that would make actual change, and they're afraid of that.
Stein has been polling at about 1%, similar to progressive academic and independent candidate Cornel West and Libertarian Party candidate Chase Oliver.
Also, I bet you can find a video of Trump saying that he hates Stein. I mean, just like you said, if you say everything,
There's stuff of him saying nice things about Bernie and being threatened by Bernie being a nominee.
there's stuff about him saying he hates Putin and stuff about him saying he loves Putin. I mean,
There's
come
stuff
on.
he said, hate Kim Jong-un, love Kim Jong-un. He said everything. So it doesn't matter. In some battleground states, those votes may make all the difference.
Bill Jill Stein.
Third-party candidates have long been blamed for their impact on tight election outcomes. Most notably in 2000, when Green Party nominee Ralph Nader earned almost 100,000 votes in Florida, a state that eventually went to George W. Bush along with the presidency by only 537 votes.
Let's also point out how much of a massive disaster that was.
Yeah, the Republicans stole the damn election.
Why? Because the Green Party was like
No,
popular.
because they said they didn't count all the votes because of the stupid bubble. Yeah. But third-party candidates and supporters have rejected the blame, arguing that they are working to challenge a fundamentally broken two-party system and giving voters a greater choice.
Absolutely.
You don't have a democracy unless it's a competitive democracy at election time, Nader recently told Al Jazeera. Historically, the function of third parties in an electoral college system has never really been to win elections, but to have new agendas, he said. With only two choices, Democrat or Republican, Nader added, on major issues, they are very similar. A Gallup poll this month found 58% of U.S. voters agree that a third major party is needed because the Republican and Democratic parties do such a poor job of representing the American people.
But let's not shift our policies and try to represent the U.S. people better.
Let's just sue Jill Stein off the fucking ballots. Let's do that because we're fucking
Hey, you're a better person
dead
than me.
inside Democrats. While she has virtually no chance of winning the presidency, Stein's message has been particularly resonant for some voters during Israel's war in Gaza and Democrats and Republicans' unwavering support for it. She has been a consistent critic of U.S. support for Israel, a position that has won her new supporters this election cycle. The Kamala Harris campaign is looking for a scapegoat, she told Washington Post this week, referring to Harris's campaign's concern about her candidacy. They could change their policy right now. The problem is they would rather lose the election than end the genocide. Exactly right. This week, the Abandon Harris campaign, a Michigan-based Muslim group that says it aims to hold Democratic President Joe Biden's administration accountable for the Gaza genocide, endorsed Stein for president. Our movement remains dedicated to ensuring that the American people, especially the Muslim American community, recognize the responsibility we share in standing up against oppression and using all our power to stop genocide, wherever it may arise, the group said in a statement. On the precipice of this election, we endorse Jill Stein.